Law and Order Judea. Hello, I'm Kendall Bryan Hunter, author of the book Consider My Servant Job, and this is Come Follow Me, Get to the Point, where I always show up, I always come prepared, we never take roll, and it's bring your own refreshments. So there's a cow, and you put your butter in there, and this water, and apparently this is what they do in France. I served my mission in Portugal, never saw this, and I wasn't in France long enough to see if they did things this way, but there you go. Oh, also, like I said, I have to buy honey in the box and in the bottle shaped like a bear, and this has a cow on it. Not milk, but it's butter. So, Law and Order Judea, we are dealing with a courtroom drama as we finish the book of Acts. So it gets really boring. There's a lot of procedural stuff, and you have to pay attention is that you have two jurisdictions. You have the Jewish Sanhedrin jurisdiction, and then you have the Roman jurisdiction. The Romans control the area. They conquered it. So you know how those things go. You lose the war. You're under someone else's subjugation. So as we study the life of Paul, this is not CSI, Law and Order, Perry Mason. This is more like Friends, Kafka's book, The Trial, where things are just crazy. And Paul has two jurisdictions or two citizenships. One is Israel as a Jew, but also he has a Roman citizenship. And this is kind of interesting because we're not really sure where he got it from. Apparently his parents had it because he was born a free Roman, and that's kind of interesting. There's some speculation, but it's not clear. But certainly he had it, because if you lied about it, it'd be worse off than doing that, than making it up. So Cliffhanger. We left when there's a mob at the temple, and they want to rip Paul to pieces because they accused him of bringing gentiles within the temple grounds. That'd be like letting someone into the temple nowadays, someone in the temple who didn't have a current temple recommend. And so he gets arrested. It's interesting, you pay attention to the language shift. The King James says he's talking in Hebrew and then one point in Greek. But one of the other translations translates as Aramaic, saying that the word for Hebrew and Aramaic are the same. So I think Aramaic would be the correct one. That's the general language that people are speaking in the area. We know this because we have the transliterations in the New Testament when Christ was speaking. That's the language he is talking in, and not in Hebrew, and not Greek and not Latin. So he gets arrested, starts talking in Aramaic. Also, he starts talking in Greek, and they want to arrest him and take him and have him whipped for starting a riot. Then Paul says, "Hey, wait a minute! I'm a Roman citizen. You need to give me a trial." That just stops everything right in the tracks. The guards, the people here, and say, "Wait, he's a Roman citizen," because they know if they violate Paul's rights as a Roman citizen, they're the next guy up on the crucifix. So the problem is that Paul understood that if he's in the jurisdiction or the custody of the Sanhedrin, they'd do to him what they did to Jesus Christ. He would not get a fair trial. He went with the Romans. He'd get a less, not so much a fair trial, but a less unfair trial. Would be, I think, the correct way to express that. Plus, they wouldn't have the religious prejudice, because the Sanhedrin would think he's an apostate corrupting it, whereas Romans were a little bit more, okay, this is, just leave your religion here. Make sure we're concerned about your loyalty to the government at Rome, loyalty to Caesar, and just kind of leave you alone, do whatever you want to do. So that was a better venue choice for Paul than to the Sanhedrin. So chapter 23, Ananias, again, he goes there, and they just want to whip Paul to punish him, have him scourged, and Paul brings up, "Hey, wait a minute, under Jewish law, you need to give me due process, the law of Moses." And then as they're talking at the Sanhedrin, Paul realized that part of they're Pharisees, part of it are Sadducees. So Paul's a Pharisee, and they believe in spiritual stuff. They also believe in the resurrection. Sadducees do not believe in the resurrection. You can go to the Bible dictionary to read about the distinction between the two, the Pharisees and the Sadducees. So one group believes in the resurrection, the other group doesn't believe in the resurrection. So Paul puts up this diversionary tactic and said, I'm here because of my belief in the resurrection. So that puts the Sanhedrin in chaos. And actually, resurrection's a part of the Jewish belief. In the Middle Ages, a Jewish philosopher named Maimonides wrote a list of 13 articles of faith for Jews, and one of them was belief in the resurrection. So, they have it in there. I don't know how how potent it is or relevant it is now, depending on which branch of Judaism, but that's a little bit off topic because this is get to the point. And the point is we're talking about the book of Acts. So it causes this disruption in there, and they want to rip Paul to pieces, so the Romans have to step in again to protect the Roman citizen. And during the night, Paul gets another experience with the second comforter. The Savior appears to him and talks about his trip to Rome. What happens in order to transport Paul, they're transporting him to a different venue. I think it's Caesarea. The leader of the Roman garrison there in Judea, what he does is, it's funny you read. I had to go back there and check another translation to make sure I was reading it right, but he details 470 soldiers to protect Paul. Now, part of the reason why they had to have 470 soldiers to protect Paul, and that's about half the garrison there, is that what happened is there's 40 people entered into a secret combination to kill Paul. However, Paul's nephew heard about it. That's interesting. We don't know about Paul's family life. He had a sister, he has a nephew, and the nephew reports to the Romans, say, yeah, they made this covenant to kill Paul. And like I said, you got to protect someone with Roman citizenship. The leader of the garrison also was a Roman citizen, and apparently it cost him a lot of money. He kind of asked Paul, okay, how'd you get this? This is, you have to pay through the nose to get citizenship. And Paul said he was freeborn. So 470 soldiers to protect Paul as he's traveling. Sorry about that. And gets sent to Felix, who I believe was the term would be governor, but he was the one who was overseeing the area. Felix is Latin for happy, so Mr. Happy. And his wife, Drusilla, also happens to be Jewish. I understand that was his third wife, but how those things go. And Paul makes his defense before Felix. Now, it's interesting in verse 22, they use this expression, and you see it in the book of Acts, called the way. And King James leaves it lowercase as the NIV capitalizes it, but apparently that's what the gospel was called in the book of Acts. They didn't call it, we shouldn't call it Mormonism, we should call it the doctrine of Christ is what we teach. But the term in the book of Acts was the way, which is kind of a common term that other people use, like with Taoism. That's what Taoism means, the way. So Felix hears Paul. He likes him. His wife may have had some influence with him. Keeps him under house arrest for 2 years. And the real reason why he did that is he wanted a bribe from Paul. If Paul had paid the bribe, he just would have gone on, and that would have been the end of the story. So 2 years, that Felix gets replaced by Festus. Festus is Latin for joyous. Think of festival. Felix, felicity. Festus, joyous festival. And Festus wants to throw the Sanhedrin a bone and say, hey, look, I'll give you Paul just to make as a peace offering. Same thing you read about in Luke chapter 23, verse 12. And Paul knows that if he's in danger, if he goes back to the Sanhedrin, he will not get a fair trial. So he pulls out his trump card, and that is he appeals to Caesar. So kind of sitting in there, like I said, this is sort of jurisdictional, weird courtroom drama type thing. And what happens is King Agrippa and Festus, the Roman governor, they go there, and they have both of them together talking with Paul. There's actually a third person. I can't remember his name now. Sorry, I'm focusing on this. Didn't put it in his notes. He goes there and he makes a case against Paul, and they hear it. And Paul again testifies about his experience, and that's bugging me. The Bible, New Testament, Acts 23. Oh no, this is actually 26. And go on, dead time. What happened? And oh, sorry, I can't find it. So Paul testifies against himself, and at the end of it, Festus says, "Your learning's made you mad." Remember we talked about the crowd reaction. Your learning has made you mad. When Agrippa hears it, it says, "Almost thou persuadest me to be a Christian." So you have some kind of funny crowd reaction, but the end point is Festus says, "Look, there's nothing wrong with this guy. He's not seditious. This is like one of these internal matters. you all need to sort this out. This does not involve Rome. Caesar is not threatened. But it makes the point is that, look, if you hadn't appealed to Caesar, we would have let you go. And that may or may not have been true. He may have been covering himself because, like he said, he wanted to use Paul as a bit of a bargaining chip with the Jews. So they send him off to Rome. In chapters 27-28 is the Gilligan's Island chapter, where they have the shipwreck. Now, as you start reading this, Luke resumes using the word we. So apparently Luke was on this shipwreck voyage with Paul. So Paul gets personal revelation about what's going to happen on his voyage. Yeah, there's going to be problems, but as the voyage goes, notice how Paul gets inspiration and personal revelation to deal with problems during the voyage. So they get this storm that goes on for about 2 weeks, and they have to jump ship, and they end up swimming to the island of Melita. So they sail from Judea, land at Crete, and then heading their way to Italy and land on Melita. Sorry, I should have taken a Ricola before I got started this. So they jump on it, swim to shore, and as they're shipwrecked, Paul goes around gathering sticks for a fire, reaches down, and a snake bites him. He takes a snake and he just shakes it off, and they said, okay, wait, the gods are punishing you. This guy is actually guilty, and wait a minute, he just survived a snake bite. Oh, he's probably innocent. It's just kind of funny that. The other one, while he's on the island, Paul's able to heal the governor's father. Finally, they make it to Rome, and Paul's under house arrest, so he can, like I said, he's sitting in his house. He's not in prison, so he has a little bit more freedom, but he just can't leave his house, and he entertains visitors, and that's where the book of Acts ends. And later he, of course, Paul writes a lot of his epistles from Rome, and eventually gets executed. And you can read about that in the Bible dictionary of Paul's fate. But, this is an interesting person. You look back on his life, that he certainly had skills and attributes that were an asset to the church, and his ability to speak different languages, his ability to, as a teacher, and to teach in the manner of the Jews, the ability to write in Greek, so he could reach all the members of the church in different parts of in the eastern part of the Roman Empire, the old Alexander part, and his Roman citizenship. That made a really big difference. So it's interesting to think about this. He just had this odd and very useful skill set that is able to work for the church. And as we get into the Christ quotient, what's your skill set? What's your skill set? What are you bringing to the church? What do you have that can help the church? For example, 2 of my friends from my mission have been called as mission presidents. So I served a mission in Portugal and Europe. Both of them were called as mission presidents in Brazil. The reason, because part of their skill set was the ability to speak the language Portuguese, and they're able to be useful in the church. So what's Paul's discipleship like? Once he gets converted, look what happened to him. And what's your journey like? Are you getting resistance like with paying tithing? How's that working out? Using the correct name of the church? How's that working out? For example, because of the R rating, I decided to opt out of the Oppenheimer movie, and apparently there's some pornographic scenes in there. So members of the church with current temple recommends paying money to see a pornographic movie, and it's just stuck on their head for the rest of their lives. Well, I hope you got your money's worth. Doing temple work, spending your time doing temple work. What do people think about that? Are you investing time in that? What are your personal shipwrecks, and what are your personal snake bites that you're having to deal with, and are you turning to Christ? Another thing to think about is Paul's gifts of the Spirit. A gift of tongues, gift of prophecy, getting the second comforter, I think 3 times is what happened with Paul that we haven't recorded. It could have been more. We just don't know. How are you using your gifts of the work to do the work of the church? Are you praying for knowledge and discernment over your ministering families? What revelation are you getting for them? Gift of tongues as you give a sacrament meeting talk, or as you're talking to people. Gift of knowledge for your testimony. Gifts of the Spirit, are you appealing to them? Last thing, Paul's message, and you read this in the entire book of Acts, their message was about the resurrection. So what's your testimony based on? Church activities, behaviors. Well, I served a mission, I got a degree from BYU, so I'm a good member. Or is your testimony based on the resurrection? Is it on Jesus Christ? Are you basing your testimony on a witness of the Holy Ghost about the central miracle of Jesus Christ? And testifying of Jesus Christ, that's the point.